Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural event for Maple Business Council's New York chapter. I'd especially like to welcome our guest of honor today, Khawar Nasim, Acting General Counsel for the Consulate here in New York. Welcome, Khawar.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
And I'd also like to recognize the founders of Maple who joined us today, Stephen Armstrong, President, and Robert Kelle, our Chairman of the Board. Welcome, gents. We'll be back to you a little bit to hear from you as well. So just as a quick overview, I am John Costanzo. I joined Maple in June after serving as president of Purelator International, a package delivery and freight delivery company, providing services to U.S. companies to their customers and businesses across Canada. I also serve as a board member of the Long Island Association here in New York, a local business association. I chair its international committee and was appointed by Governor Cuomo in 2018 to be a member of the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council and currently co-chair the Regional Manufacturing Committee for that group. My wife and I are native New Yorkers, originally from the New York City borough of Queens, and we've been Long Island residents since the 70s. While working in logistics, I had the privilege of traveling and conducting business in all but one or two U.S. states and many countries around the world. Yet, except for a few years, my wife and I have lived here in New York. We raised our family here. And so you can say, as the saying goes, we love New York. And I'm thrilled to be able to join Maple to help continue to promote and facilitate trade between U.S. companies here in the New York region and companies and businesses based in the Canadian market. So thank you for joining us again. And I'd like to review briefly our event for today, which is a pretty packed agenda. Next, I'll be talking a little bit about what pulls us together economically between the New York region and Canada. We'll then have a conversation with Consul General Nasim. We'll move to Stephen and Robert to discuss Maple's roots, how it was founded, what they see and what their vision is for the future. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you could become part of the Maple community. A little housekeeping before we get started. Phones will be muted for the audio quality of everybody aboard today. We'll be recording today's event for the benefit of those of you that couldn't attend, or those people that couldn't attend, or those of you that wish to share it with other colleagues in your firms. Questions are welcome. Please, however, since you're muted, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the dashboard, and we'll answer as many of those as we can, and if not, we'll get back to you afterwards. So thanks again for joining us, and let's move now to take a look at why opening a chapter for Maple in New York was so important to our organization. Well, first, international trade and investment is foundational to the health of any region's economy. A good example would be even smaller companies like the Netherlands and Singapore have overcome their size to rank among the top trading countries in the world. And New York is always first on their list of company or countries or regions where they'd like to open first. So as a result, it's become one of the most important business and investment capitals in the world. And as I'll cover in a few moments, the trade relationship between Canada and New York, particularly in the provinces of Ontario and Quebec, is one of the largest relationships in the world, perhaps the largest bilateral relationship that exists, and has been highly beneficial to both parties. If we were to combine the GD output of Ontario, Quebec, and New York, it would rank in the top 5 economies of the world. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. And in many ways, the culture and the business environment in that 500-mile radius surrounding New York, Toronto, and Montreal has more in common with each other than it does with other parts of the United States, or in the case of Canada, other provinces. In short, Maple needs to be here to help foster an already vibrant trade relationship and cultural relationship between Canada and New York, and to capitalize on the opportunities in the new USMCA agreement. So let's look a little bit at the scope now of that relationship. Probably the most important statistic on this slide is that over 1 million jobs today depend on trade with Canada from the New York metropolitan region. New York State has exports $19 billion to Canada, and 681,000 jobs depend on that trade. Canada's #1 export market for the New York region. Connecticut adds another 2.4 billion and 96,000 odd jobs. New Jersey, 7.8, 274,000 jobs. And combined, we export $30 billion. And again, over a million jobs are dependent on trade with Canada for the New York metropolitan region. And where is all that trade conducted? Well, as I mentioned earlier, 86% of the trade that the New York area conducts with Canada is between New York and Ontario and Quebec. Alberta is growing, however, faster than some other regions at about 7.8%. And the other region of the country make up the difference. And this region is a major contributor in overall international trade. Merchandise exports to New York from Canada rank 4th among the 50 states, and merchandise imports from New York to Canada rank 5th, only preceded by states that have heavy manufacturing like Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. New York, it ranks among the top 5 in trade for Canada. And as opposed to our trade with other parts of the world, it's bilateral. There's a little bit of a dated slide, but it's still pretty significant today, and it has grown. Trade in Canadian dollars, merchandise trade in Canadian dollars reached 44 billion back in 2016. As you can see by this graph, exports to the United States were a little heavier back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I think the main reason for some of that flattening, although it's coming back a bit here in recent years, was the increase of imports coming out of Asia. And it's just more evidence as why we need to work more closely together to strengthen the relationship we have through the USMCA agreement. And until the pandemic hit in March, Canada ranked #2 in total trade value through March 2020 with a total of $144 billion. Exports were $69 billion and imports $75. So pretty equal trade balance in consideration of our trade with other markets, larger markets, and a very, very important one to the economies of both regions. In terms of relative size of New York, in terms of GDP, New York's GDP is 88% the size of all Canadian GDP. And if you were to add New Jersey and Connecticut, I think it'd be pretty close. So it's a critical partner for the Canadian market and vice versa. Gross domestic product, as I mentioned, is 1.5 trillion versus 1.7 in Canada. And the gross domestic product per capita is 75,000 on a population of 20 million. So a very critical market for Canadian companies and an important one for Maple to be part of. And it's a very supportive environment. It's obviously one of the largest business capitals in the world. 306 designated opportunity zones. These are zones that support business growth, development, entrepreneurship. New York City is also the home for many internationally known employers, including Netflix, other media companies, Pfizer, Amex, all the networks, JP Morgan, and almost Amazon. Hopefully we can persuade them that's a good idea again in the future. The Port of New York is the 3rd largest port in the nation, third only, that is, to LA and Long Beach, and has invested a lot. New York has invested a lot in infrastructure here. We've raised bridges to accommodate the new Panama crossing for large container ships. So it's going to be a key port in the future for companies interested in trading with our market. There's direct service for executives and freight moving to and from New York by air to more than 400 destinations and origins worldwide via LaGuardia, Kennedy, and Newark Liberty. And there are 2 major rail centers here that provide connections to cities across the whole United States and Canada. And despite the rumors otherwise, Wall Street is alive and well. New York-based companies closed nearly 1,000 deals totaling $9.4 billion, up from 1.7 in 2008. New York City's share of global venture capital funding continues to increase, now 6% of all global capital funding versus 4.6 back in 2008. Has a population of 8.6 million, 4.2 million of those folks work, and the city has a highly skilled workforce. The jobs are important here. Now, there's been a big question in everybody's mind. Are we going to recover from the pandemic and everything else going on? Will New York ever be the same as it was? Well, as a born and raised New Yorker and having lived through the trauma of 9/11, we never thought that downtown Wall Street would be back. And if you've been down there lately, it's never been more vibrant. And my belief is it'll be again. It's only a matter of time when we clear this pandemic. Last but not least, in terms of a major opportunity for investors here, there are 173,000 jobs in the 5 boroughs of New York in the tech sector. And this is a gain of 52,000 and change between the years 2011 to 2018. This is one of the fastest growing sectors in New York. This area of New York is one of the critical growth regions for the tech sector, and along with biotechnology, bodes well for the future of the region. As for foreign investment, New York by far has more jobs in foreign-owned enterprises than any other U.S. metro region in the country. LA region and Chicago, Joliet, Naperville region combined equal about what New York's foreign investment business ownership is. And where are they investing? Well, as mentioned earlier, software and IT services are key growth sectors here, and that's where all the money's coming in, or the number one place money's coming in. Second is in financial services, since we're among the financial capitals of the world, and then followed by the other sectors I've shown here. So that's a bit of a brief overview of why Maple is here, and it's pretty clear as to why it's been a symbiotic and a highly beneficial relationship built over more than 100 years between our region here and the Canadian market. And it continues to grow and prosper, and we need to be part of it. We need to help facilitate that growth and be part of the community that continues that excellent relationship in years to come. Khawar Nasim serves as Deputy Consul General for Canada in New York prior to his New York assignment, and by the way, now Acting General Counsel. And prior to his assignment, Mr. Nasim was Canada Consul General in Minneapolis. He's a career diplomat who joined the Canadian Department of External Affairs in 1993, and he served in the European and Investment and Technology Division, the South Asian Trade Division, and Trade Operations Policy Unit as Minister, as Second Secretary for the Commercial Affairs in Rome, then Barcelona, where he was Consul from 2004 to 2007. Also, he served as Minister Counselor for Economic and Commercial Affairs from 2007 to 2010, again in that second posting in Rome. In 2010, Mr. Nasim took leave from government and became Vice President of External Affairs for one of Canada's largest gold companies, Yamana Gold of Toronto. He returned to diplomatic service and served as Counselor for Commercial Affairs in The Hague, where he served from 2014 to 2016. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, he became Consul General in Minneapolis in 2016, and now Acting Consul General in New York. He has a bachelor's from Carleton University. His MBA is from McGill, married, has 2 children, and we're thrilled to have you aboard today, Khawar, to join us for a conversation about your mission here in New York.
Thanks, John. Delighted to be here with you, and great presentation, by the way. I really did enjoy it. I learned a lot, and I want to congratulate you and Stephen and John and Robert as well for setting up Maple. This is a tremendous opportunity for us to work together. I look forward to a long partnership with you guys. There's so much for us to do together, as you've outlined, and you know, the more partners and friends we can have, the better.
Thank you. It's wonderful that we have you here today, and we look forward to working closely with you and your team. My first question to you this afternoon, Khawar, is pretty topical. It's how has the overall mission of the consulate here in New York been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic?
John, first let me start by saying, the Consulate General in New York, we've been around for over 101 years. We started in Times Square in 1919, and we had an office called an information office. It sounds very, very sort of John le Carré mystery novel-esque, We have offices in New York City, but we cover Delaware, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Bermuda. We also have offices in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. And we do the full gamut of services, everything from visas to consular to immigration to advocacy work. We're working a lot on the aluminum tariffs that have been introduced by the administration. But a lot of our focus is on business and business development. We have 21 officers dedicated to trade and investment relationships between Canada and the United States, between Canada and our territory. I would say that it's important to understand that when we look at trade and investment, we don't look at it as a one-way street where we're trying to export product in or trying to attract investment. We look at it in a two-way form. We want to get Canadian companies here doing business, employing people, and that's why our relationship is fair and balanced. To get to your question on the pandemic, John, what I would say is that, one of our primary functions right now is ensuring the safety and security of our staff and our operations. We've closed our offices out of a degree of security. We're open for visas, we're open for consular, but most people are working from home. That's been a mixed experience. I think we're experiencing some efficiencies, some loss of contact. We missed the humanity. I would have loved to have been with you folks in Long Island and doing this in person, but this is the reality that we're operating in. Over the course of the past 6 months, we haven't stopped in terms of engaging. Every week or every day. This morning, I was talking to the president of the Steelworkers Union about aluminum tariffs. I've spoken with Lieutenant Governor Hochul about business to business, the border issues. I've spoken with 8 or 9 congressional representatives. We've done USMCA promotion events with folks like the World Trade Center in Buffalo, the District Economic Councils in New York and in New Jersey. And I've spoken with over 20 CEOs to get their read on the pandemic and how it's impacting them and how do we ensure transparency and fluidity in our business relationships. I think, John, that one of the things that concerns us, quite frankly, is that the pandemic will create a desire for people to look increasingly inward, to look more local, more domestic, and that is a threat and a challenge to those of us who are promoting the tremendous business relationship we have between Canada and the United States. So even during this isolation, we have been working on PPE equipment, getting it back and forth across the border. We've been supporting Canadian healthcare workers who are coming into the United States. There are over 1,000 that come in every day into the United States to offer support to hospitals in New York State. We've been doing that sort of work on a day-to-day basis. We have Canadian transmission line workers who came to assist in the restoration of power following Tropical Storm Isaias. So, the relationship is tremendous. It's multifaceted, and in spite of the pandemic, and we continue to work at a feverish pace to promote the numerous aspects and the positive aspects of our relationship.
Thank you. That's excellent. Yeah, it's interesting that point of view of people looking more inward now. That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I hope you get out of that. One of the things you mentioned to me a while back, Khawar, is that you had many events each month at the consulate, I believe. Yeah, could you expand on that a little bit?
So John, in all of this, we have a brand new office that we share with our mission to the United Nations, and we're right in Midtown, right at Grand Central Station. In 1 year alone, we did over 500 events and attracted over 15,000 people through our space. It was a very public space. We used it for everything from cultural events to book readings to trade events to artist expositions. We had seminars, we had activities, and we capitalized on that space enormously. It was a tremendous asset for us. And of course, it's become a victim of the pandemic. We have got to be secure and things. I look forward to us getting back to that normal because it was a real great place to showcase Canada, Canadian companies, Canadian artists, but also to meet with and greet and work with groups like yours, the Maple Business Council.
Well, thank you. That kind of leads into the next question, I guess, and that is, what other activities or initiatives have kind of been put on hold as a result of the pandemic that you're looking forward to relaunching again when we come out of this, this phase?
So, John, I liked what you said at the beginning when you talked about the fact that New York has come through a financial crisis of 2007, 2008. It's come through 9/11. I tell anyone who will listen that, New York is as resilient a place as they come. It is the center of culture and media and commerce and ideas and thoughts. And New York will be back, and we want very much to be a part of that. I have a team, and I take a lot of pride in the number of the activities we've done, promoting cultural artists, promoting sports diplomacy. I have to mention now, because of the constituents you have, that I grew up as an Islander fan. I'm a huge fan of the Islanders. I'm still supporting them. I think we're going to knock off Washington in short order. That was just a blip on the road, but I'm a huge supporter of sports diplomacy. It's a great vehicle to connect us with people. We've got a lot of Canadians who are in the sports world, whether it's RJ Barrett from the Knicks or Matthew Barzal or Mark Messier. These are people who become representatives of what it is to be Canadian. I think that the other thing that we're doing is we're doing a lot of work on the diversity angle, promoting the inclusive mandate, the nature of Canada. We are promoting Indigenous artists. We are promoting, our LGBTQ community. And we've worked, on our annual Women in Business Conference, which is elevating and promoting Canadian businesses. USMCA is something that, we're hoping to promote the heck out of once we get back on this, because it provides a stable and predictable framework for business who want to operate. But I want to answer your question specifically, John. I like to answer questions directly. You said, which are the ones that we're specifically looking at? We have a program called the Canadian Technology Accelerators Program. And this year we're focusing on bringing or connecting emerging Canadian enterprises with capital, ideas, and market in New York City, in clean tech, in digital health, and cybersecurity. We are going to be calling on companies to talk about how the flexible approach on immigration is an advantage for Canada. So we're going to be doing that on September 3rd. We're doing a FinTech, Finovate conference between September 14 and 18. And we're going to get the best Canadian companies to attend that virtually, I would imagine. We're going to be promoting 10 Canadian music publishers through virtual pitch sessions here in the United States between September 25 and October 2nd. And we're going to have a spotlight showcase, a Spotlight on Canada documentary film producers at Doc New York City. So there's a raft of activities. I've got a very ambitious program led by Nigel Neal in our Trade Commissioner Service. We take requests from clients who are looking to do business with Canada, but there's still a lot on tap. And we're looking at new ways of delivery, but we're continuing to work on it.
That's phenomenal. And I think you already know one of our colleagues here on Long Island, Bob Kelle, who heads up the Advanced Energy Research Technology Center over at Stony Brook. He'll be speaking with us next month, and perhaps I'm sure you can share with us some things you're doing in concert in that accelerator with that organization.
Hopefully we can participate.
Yeah, that would be terrific. I'd like to move to USMCA, and one of the things that USMCA did is it raised, as you know, the de minimis factor, right? So now instead of $20 Canadian, you can move freight and cargo into Canada up to, I believe, $150 without paying duty, and tax is raised to $40. When I originally heard that, Khawar, I thought, well, that's not much of a difference. I remember 40 years ago it was $20, and now it's $150. It should be $1,000, right? But from my colleagues in the sector, they're telling me that the e-commerce sector in particular, which typically has goods less than 150, but more than 20, have benefited tremendously from that one change, and that growth into Canada from the States now is booming. And of course, in reverse, the U.S. de minimis is, I believe, $1,000 now, which is more Canadian, right? So how has e-commerce helped to drive trade in your mind, and will continue to drive trade over the next several years?
John, great question. First of all, what I would say is that e-commerce has gotten an enormous boost by the pandemic because almost everything has shifted. So much of it has shifted electronically. The de minimis was one of those issues that came out of the negotiations in the USMCA. Just a word about the USMCA in the sense that, we're Canadian and we're polite, but, when we heard commentary saying it was the worst deal ever, it was terrible, we had to tear it up and throw it in the garbage, we were saying, oh, hold on a second, trade has tripled in the time since we've introduced NAFTA. We have increased our GDP. We are doing incredible things back and forth. We achieved what we wanted in an integrated supply chain. Yes, there have been bumps along the way. There have been some irritants, but that's how you negotiate. You have a discussion, you move forward. This is a gold standard accord. It addresses and develops. It is. You have a one-stop portal for duties. You have specific chapters on small and medium enterprises. You've got new job codes which allow the free flow of labor in the digital economy. And e-commerce is one of the areas where we're going to see growth because sooner, the commerce is not going to be jurisdictional. It is going to be transnational. I know we wanted to have the de minimis moved up. It's one of those ones, John, where it was sticky for so long that we got it from 20 to 80. We've achieved a lot within this accord. We've got better access for U.S. farmers into the Canadian agriculture market and reciprocally for Canada. We have preserved and we've raised the standards for domestic components in the automobile area. We've raised labor codes in Mexico. There are a lot of things to be positive about the USMCA. And most importantly, for the business people on this line, it provides predictability. There will be no new tariffs beyond included in this. It will keep almost 99% of our goods tariff-free. So it's a good deal.
I think that was a good insight on e-commerce and its importance to the future. Next question I have for you is, having lived and worked as a leader of the New York Consulate General since 2017, how would you compare this assignment to your very interesting assignments in Rome, The Hague, and other parts of the world?
So let me start by saying it's an honor and a privilege to represent Canada abroad. And I have relished all of my postings. The diplomatic answer is that each one is unique and each one brings, and you look to the connections that it makes with Canada. I can tell you though, John, I always come down to the issue of relevance. And the New York market is so relevant to Canada. We have 17 border crossings. We do $30 billion in commerce. If you go into New York City, it is full of Canadians. There's always a connection to Canada. Oh, my wife is from Canada. We summer in Canada. My daughter studies in Canada. We do business with Canada. The connections, the relevance, the issues that you see on the front page of the newspapers in Canada are border, immigration, tariffs, innovation, free trade, all of these things. And that's what we do in New York. These are issues that we handle and manage in New York. So in terms of relevance, my job, it's never been more relevant to Canada than it has been here. When you're in a place like Rome, listen, you eat very well, fantastic. I have fond memories, and I go back. And it was more difficult to get traction for what we do. In New York, it's everywhere. Canadians are everywhere. Canadian companies are here, and there's a real interest and a thirst and a knowledge of Canadian. And the familiarity is such that I often say that we do things together, and we have families on both sides of the border. We drink the same beer. We watch the same sports. We abide the same cultural icons. There's everything from Mike Myers to we laugh at the same joke. So there's an enormous familiarity, which makes my job interesting and easy.
Yeah, that's terrific. Since you bring it up with all the Canadians in New York, I noted that you earned your MBA from McGill. And I understand there's thousands of graduates of Canadian universities here in the New York metropolitan area. How has that shaped, in your mind, the economic and maybe, to your point, the cultural relationship between New York and Canada?
John, I'll build on my previous answer by saying, we estimate that there are between 400 and 500,000 Canadians living in New York City. Now, the vast majority of them come down here because it's New York and it has such an appeal for culture, media, commerce, finance. And so we've got a lot of Canadians down here, and they are ambassadors for Canada. They represent us well. Every year in the fall, we do a Terry Fox run, and we get thousands of people in Central Park running, and there's such a strong connection. You know, Canadian universities and alumni, they illuminate our past, but they also drive the future for us. And we've got a lot of connections with Canadian universities. Every year in New York, we do an alumni reception. It sells out. We have all of the universities come down and they connect to Canadians down here. And, you know, I think that it's also a reflection on just how successful Canadian universities have become at recruiting top talent. You know, people here in New York, I've got kids in high school. A lot of their colleagues know about McGill University or Waterloo University, University of Toronto. I know I'm going to forget some, and somebody out there is going to tell me, you forgot my university. Well, Queens, Western, they're all great universities. There's some really, really great schools. And in addition to the Canadians coming down, we're seeing a lot of Americans going up into Canada to study, and they're welcome. I was working with somebody just through the pandemic to get their son into school at McGill. So yeah, those people become the future ambassadors for the relationship.
Great point. Great point. Along this lines of your experience, to go back to that for a moment, as you know, New York. Gold and natural gas, I think, represent about 20% of the trade between Canada and New York. How was your experience in the gold mining industry, giving you a perspective on that most of us don't share, to be honest? Love to hear your point of view.
So, John, a couple of things on that. First of all, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work for one of Canada's largest gold producers, Yamana Gold. I was down in Argentina a lot of the time doing government relations. But, taking that step out of the public sector spectrum and into the private sector, you gain a much better appreciation for both the utility and the functionality of government and how it relates to. Too often I find that they're in separate vortexes where preconceived notions of the utility of government or the functions and the market-driven nature of the private sector, they don't mesh well enough. I've seen both sides. I've seen the utility. When I was in Toronto working for Yamana, I used the government quite frequently to help us on tricky issues. I feel blessed to have had that opportunity, but I did come back to public service because those are the core values that I identify with: service, gratitude, values, and ethics. Those are things that I align with. The freewheeling capitalism of Bay Street, it was perhaps too fast for this old guy.
Well, we're glad you made that decision. If I could jump back for a moment to the USMCA, you touched on some areas you thought, like the dairy industry, for example. We talked about e-commerce. Can you see any other opportunities there? I know one of them I was very curious about. I read somewhere that under the old NAFTA agreement, U.S. companies were able to sue Canadian counterparts for complaints about trade practices in external third-party courts, not even the Canadian court. And that now is out of the agreement. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if so, yeah.
One of the things that we've been able to maintain is dispute resolution, and dispute resolution is very important. I mean, they're able to, but they're in the courts of the jurisdiction, and so we have resolution of these, and we have Chapter 11. It is dispute resolution. We've been able to maintain it. But one of the things that I think about USMCA is a concept and a framework which allows commerce to go back and forth. Why I'm so optimistic about it right now, John, is that we are going to see greater calls for domestication of supply chains. One of the things that's come out of the pandemic has been a realization that much of our PPE, much of our products which are safety related, has come from Asia. And so there are going to be greater calls for domestication. And I think that nourishes an argument for we should be building things in North America. And what I want us to avoid collectively your good folks at Maple, the people on this, it's a call to say, it's got to be Buy America. It's got to be, it has to have this amount of America and excluding Canada. The example on that one is the aluminum tariffs. We've seen the reintroduction of tariffs by USTR, and we thought to ourselves, look, we're a small part of the market. There are market fluctuations. We're not the culprit in this. The culprit in this is quite obvious, and it's China on this one. And yet we've got a 10% tariff in Canada, which is going to result in reciprocal tariffs from Canada. It's going to impact and create impurities in the market. These producers, one of the largest producers in Canada is Alcoa, which is based in Pittsburgh. So they're going to be producing goods on both sides of the border, face a 10% tariff there, and it's going to force them to reallocate their production to less than efficient jurisdictions. Tariffs aren't the way forward between Canada and the United States. About 99% of our trade is tariff-free. We should be looking to make things together across North America and creating what the original intent of NAFTA or USMCA is to create a regional trading bloc to compete with Europe and Asia and to make sure that we are doing so in a North American context.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We're not the competition, right? We should be strengthening the partnership because the competition from elsewhere is much more significant. I couldn't agree more.
Right.
On the point of investment in the market, one of the things I noticed in my career in the logistics business, that when a company decided to expand outside of the United States, a U.S. company, generally their first, if not first, second choice was Canada. Why do you think it's such an attractive investment opportunity for U.S. companies?
Well, first of all, John, we are creatures of habit. We go to what we know and what's familiar. We have in Canada the same rule of law. We speak the same language. As I said, we eat the same food. We have proximity. We benefit from that. We are a market which has a respect for rule of law. We have a market where the risk of going to, say, to Canada or to Mumbai, those are very different animals. Canada has also done a good job in capping its tax rates. We have competitive labor rates. Also for U.S. Employers who go to Canada, there's an enormous benefit in that the social costs of getting an employee there are significantly reduced. The public healthcare system means that an employee's salary is not saddled with an additional private healthcare cost. Public education is good and available and free. So when you're moving your employees, there's a lot of attractiveness to that. In addition, we have attracted a very talented work pool in Canada. Our universities are producing some of the best students in the world in areas of artificial intelligence, in areas of engineering and science. So it's a good, stable workforce. I was speaking with one company, and he said, one of the things about Canada is that there's much less turnover in the staff. People get a job and they remain there for a longer period. The turnover rates are much more stable. People in Canada don't move around as much or as often as some of their counterparts in the US. So that's an attractive element for those looking to do business in Canada. And we're a very competitive environment. There are all kinds of studies. I won't bore you with them, but that say that Canada is one of the most lucrative places to open a business and do business. It's safe, it's predictable. There's a lot of talent out there. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, and I think the technology sector in particular, the talent in Toronto, and I heard recently Waterloo, Kitchener area is booming. And I know a lot of companies in this region are taking a hard look at setting up technology centers in the Ontario market and in the Quebec market as well.
And we'd be delighted to help them. We have a full-time investment team that is dedicated to that. And I do want to also add, John, if I may, that investment's a two-way street, and I don't want to ever be viewed as us encouraging job flight or job departure from the U.S. We have a lot of Canadian companies doing business in New York State. You referenced the number in terms of how many people are employed by Canadian companies here, but we have companies like Lion Electric, a Quebec-based electric truck and bus manufacturer, which launched its experience center in Albany. Flybits is a Toronto-based AI fintech company that develops things, and they have opened an office in New York City. And I know that Serge Sondak asked a question about Canadian banks. Canadian banks are a huge presence in Manhattan. The TD Bank is the largest retail bank in New York City. RBC, CIBC, National Bank, RBC Capital Markets, these people employ thousands and thousands of people in New York City. And that's a great thing. Delighted to have it. This is tremendous for Canada. If Canada wants to grow, they've got to expand internationally.
Great point, great point. But before we open up for questions, Khawar, I just had one other question I'd like to pose to you, and that is, you know, this is your opportunity to talk to the New York business community about, you know, why, as a closest neighbor, what is the key message, and what are the secrets about doing business in Canada they may not already be aware of, or the benefits, you know, speaking to the community here?
Yeah, you know, John, I think it goes back to the investment proposition of what Canada offers. Canada offers a safe, predictable, growing, wealthy, proximate, talented place to do business. We have a stable and secure. You are not going to lose your shirt in Canada. God forbid that should happen. You are going to see rule of law applied. You are going to see predictable practice. You are going to see governments that are promoting and encouraging investment, and they want you there. They want to do business. They are not going to tie you up. Every successive government has worked to reduce state, to reduce the burdens on economy. You are going to see a talented workforce. You know, and the other thing about it is that, you know, a lot of people look to doing business in complex ways. We have 60 flights a day on a pre-pandemic going between New York City and Toronto. It's the most traversed route in the world. We've got a lot of people doing great things on both sides of the border. And, you know, we welcome New York business. We welcome U.S. business in Canada. We understand your challenges, your ambitions. You know, U.S. investment is incredibly welcome in Canada, and it's flourished in Canada. U.S. companies, you know, if you go into any retail store or if you're driving along the corridors, you will see U.S. companies across Canada, and they are welcome. They are not squeezed. They're not, you know, seen as foreign invaders or job stealers. It's a good thing for us. We've gone through the battles over free trade, and now we're very open to that investment.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Well, Khawar, that was an excellent session. I really appreciate you taking all this time with us today. And if you can, I'd like to check and see if we have any questions from the audience that you could perhaps address for us.
Sure.
And we do. Let's see here. Okay. One of the questions is, how are Canadian banks managing in the U.S., given that they have a stronger capital base than U.S. banks, but are competing in a very crowded and tough market here in the United States? For example, this person says that TD Bank is a top 11 bank in the States on a standalone basis, and I'm sure they're very supportive of Canadian trade. Is the regulatory climate for them harder for Canadian companies here, or is it easier? You know, give us some perspective on that, if you would.
You know, first of all, I see where that question comes from. It comes from Serge Sondak, who's a friend, and I will say to you that, look, Canadian banks do extremely well in the United States. I've spoken with all of the major investors here: TD, National Bank, RBC, Scotiabank. They are doing exceptionally well here, and throughout the pandemic, they've done very well. And they have, you know, I was talking to them about how the banks have responded to the crisis, and the term that they used to use is that whereas in 2008 we were the problem, this time we're the solution. They have been able to get small business loans out. They have been able to provide solutions. They've been able to get transactions moving. They've done exceptionally well. I don't believe that there are impediments to Canadian banks. They continue to expand here and grow. They continue to see, you continue to see them in their footprint. If you go to Hudson Yards in Manhattan, you will see a real array of Canadian banks doing well. They're doing exceptionally well and I don't believe, and I'm not close enough to the file to say, well, what about this or what about that? What I would say is that they are doing very well.
Great, thank you. Another question was, what do you think is the greatest impediment to improve relations between the United States and Canada?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that if we look at it in that perspective, John, I think what we're saying is where are the headwinds coming from? And, the concerns that we have right now are that you are seeing a lot more rhetoric about Buy America or domestication of these. And what's happened is that we've always had to go out, reach out to the business community, reach out to political leaders and say, yeah, but not Canada. I mean, Canada should be excluded from this. And in the end, people, oh, yeah, we didn't mean Canada. Oh, no, we didn't. Well, we'll exclude Canada. But we're seeing blanket approaches which are on nationalization, and we're seeing a much more inward-looking. That's not only unique to the United States. We're seeing it in places like the UK, in Brazil, in other places. So for us, those are headwinds that we need to combat. We need to say, look, we need to keep the relationship between Canada free, open, and exempt from these challenges. The impediment that I see is that that's happening on both sides of the political spectrum right now. Candidate Biden has a number of provisions in there calling for Buy America, and we've seen tariffs from the Trump administration. Our ambition is to keep things as fair, open, and free as we can, and that requires a lot of convincing. But I think we have good argumentation as to why Canada is not the problem in this. We need a strategy, and I was talking with colleagues in the aluminum and steel sector, and they were saying, we need a more surgical approach to our trade policy, which says, let's build that North American bloc as opposed to, challenging Canada.
With that, I'll say thank you again for a wonderful session, and I couldn't agree more. Maple certainly hopes to be part of that solution in bridging that divide, because it is vital to this region as well as the Canadian market. If you would, I'd welcome you to stay with us if you can.
Sure.
Yeah, we're going to move on, but thank you again, Khawar. I appreciate all your time today.
John, thank you. It's a real pleasure, and I'm really, really enthusiastic about Maple. You guys are going to be great partners for us. Anything we can do to support you, you let us know. This is the first of many, and I look forward to being a friend and a partner to you guys.
Thank you so much, Khawar. And on that note, we're going to have a brief session with the two founders of Maple now. And before we do, I'd like to give you a brief background. Maple was established in 2015 in Southern California by Stephen Armstrong and Robert Kelle, who will join us in a moment. It's today recognized as one of the leading Canadian U.S. business councils here in the States, and is endorsed by the Consul General of Canada in Los Angeles, and now, thanks to Khawar, the Consul General here in New York. It's a dynamic and progressive organization through events that we hold, hopefully in the future, a few more of those in person, digital content, social media, other things, and other cross-border engagements. So that's a little bit of background, but I think it'd be more interesting to hear from the founders of the organization, Robert and Stephen, about their experience in forming this great association. So welcome, gentlemen. Can you see us here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first question is for you, Rob. Tell us, please, how Maple originally came to be.
Well, it's interesting, but in 2009, a group of us came together to charter an executive advisory board for Canadian executives living in Orange County here in Southern California. And, as we were chartering the organization, we started to get some ideas around celebrating Canadian holidays like Canada Day, Canadian Thanksgiving, hockey games, and happy hours. And while the initial focus was, let's try to do an executive advisory board, that really kind of got set aside. And for the next 5 years, we probably hosted about 50 events and uncovered about 500 Canadian expats living in the region here. We started to connect with the Canadian Consulate in Los Angeles. And in 2014, the then Deputy Consul General, Rashma Agrawal, in Los Angeles reached out to encourage us to fill a need to develop a sticky business networking organization that could really, support the mission of the consulate to promote trade and investment. So in 2015, we launched Maple, and we've had the privilege of exceeding all of our expectations. We've developed a great bilateral cross-border community, and what we've hoped to do from the beginning was really kind of create that playbook that we could be using elsewhere. So, John, thank you for hosting this today, and we're thrilled to be in New York now.
Thank you. Thank you. We're thrilled you're here as well. Could you now both share for us, maybe starting with you, Stephen, your stories, your personal stories about your experience of coming to the U.S. from Canada?
Certainly. Thank you, John. Well, I came to the U.S. originally through an executive transfer with Pillsbury, where I was working in brand management in Toronto. And the move took my wife and I to Minneapolis, which is a city that we really enjoyed, despite the Winnipeg-like winters. In fact, I remember a winter where we had 23 inches of snow in October. We had tickets to see the Timberwolves play. So it was a very small audience that night at the game, and probably the closest we'll ever be to be courtside, but we certainly took full advantage of it. My marketing career then took me to Kansas and Dallas with Pizza Hut as part of PepsiCo restaurants and later Yum Brands. And then one day, a startup from little Huntington Beach, Surf City, USA in California, knocked on my door with a digital media tablet concept for restaurants. And that was my leap to the startup world and to Southern California. That was back in 2000, and it's been home for us ever since. During that time, I've been a founding executive of a healthcare software company in Orange County. Worked in healthcare IT marketing for about 14 years, during which time I actually had an office in the West Village for a few years, and also helped a Quebec City-based software company expand into Mexico. Now I look at our new NAFTA agreement, our USMCA, with really a special vantage point of having worked in all three signatory nations. Today, I'm busy focusing on Maple Business Council together with Rob and an amazing team who give so generously of their time, and our new cross-border advisory services firm, Maple Business Advisors, and I continue to do marketing consulting.
Thank you, Rob. And how about you?
Thanks, John. 1992 is when I graduated from the University of Western Ontario. Khawar, I thought I'd just throw that one in there as another college university from Canada. Had a degree in urban development and focused on a career in real estate and real estate finance for the first several years of my career. I then moved into management consulting with Ernst & Young, starting with real estate clients, but then expanding into another number of other industries, everything from telecommunications to healthcare, automotive, and so forth. I left Ernst & Young to take on other technology leadership positions from family businesses through to the Fortune 500, including one of the largest home builders in the U.S. prior to the 2008 recession. I ran an independent consulting practice along with a small group of focused executives as well. And that gave me some flexibility to launch and grow Maple with Stephen. Today, I also hold a role in software product strategy with Oracle. We're focused on the global pharma, which is really interesting right now, especially considering the race that all of our customers are on right now to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. So it's been really interesting to see it from that perspective and just see how important the cross-border elements are as well, not just across the U.S.-Canada border, but globally.
Thank you. I'd like to maybe throw this question to both of you, maybe as two sides of the same coin. First for Stephen is, how big has Maple grown over the last 5 years? And then Robert, maybe you can comment on what vision do you have for the long term for the organization?
Well, you know, in terms of members, we're about 100 executives and about 40 organizations who are either members or strategic partners. What's really exciting, John, is that we have 20 different sectors represented across our membership. So the original vision of promoting interesting networking that takes us out of our swim lanes has really developed nicely. Robert and I like to quote LA Mayor Eric Garcetti when he talks about improbable collisions that can occur when you walk downtown and meet people from different sectors and different parts of the world, and you can learn from one another. And we know New York operates exactly the same way. So that's a large part of our DNA of our Maple networking, is bringing us together around our shared interests in Canada and the US and doing more business together. In terms of our programming, we've held over 80 events now in a little over 5 years, so we've been pretty busy. The majority of these have been in Southern California, but also in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And today really is a special moment as we hold our very first program in New York and look forward to many more to come. We're grateful too for the partnerships that have enabled us to grow, starting with the Consulate General of Canada, but also with the cities of Long Beach and Los Angeles, World Trade Centers in LA and Vancouver, the Quebec delegation, province of Ontario, the US Commercial Service, Global Affairs Canada, and the US consulates in Canada have been wonderful partners to us. So we look forward to establishing more of these relationships in the New York region too. And now I think as a measure of our growth, another mile marker is the fact that we're on both coasts in the two largest metro markets, and really thrilled to have your participation, John, to help us grow our second chapter.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be aboard. Robert, a little bit on the vision maybe for the future?
Sure. So as I alluded to early on, you know, when we started this in Southern California, that was natural. It was our adopted home for both Stephen and I. Grew our families here and so forth. And so it seemed natural to want to connect this home with our home and native land in Canada. But when we started, we always felt as though we could develop a blueprint for how to conduct and grow an organization like this in a way that is complementary to you know, our members, help support them and their growth and activities across the border, but is also complementary to the mission of the Canadian Consulate here in Los Angeles to begin with. But you know, now as we're able to look at other markets like New York and be able to develop relationships with the consulates, we feel that, you know, wherever there's an appropriate degree of trade where we want to sort of put a spotlight on it, we should be developing chapters like we just did with New York. And, you know, of course, our vision is that at some point here, we're getting together face to face and not over Zoom. And that we can do what we've done so well in those 80 events that Stephen talks about, where it's really getting together and having a different level of conversation with all of you who are, you know, with us today. So yeah, our vision is to continue to see this grow, to continue to evolve and make sure that we are meeting the needs of our members and that we are complementary to you know, our counterparts and partners, not just consulates, but other partners like the cities and local regions that we team up with.
That's excellent. Well, hopefully Khawar will afford us the opportunity to have some in-person events at that beautiful facility he has there over in Manhattan. Thank you, gentlemen, for creating this amazing organization and for joining us today to share that insight with us. I think there's a few other questions coming in. So for those of you that have more questions for Robert and for Stephen, please do put them into the Q&A and we'll be sure to get back to you. What I'd like to do now is to move on briefly to, what's next at Maple, New York. And I'm pleased to say that our next event will be held on November 12th. We're going to have the benefit of having Bob Kelle, president of the Advanced Energy and Research Technology Center here in Long Island, based out of Stony Brook University, and David Manning, director of stakeholder relations and public affairs for Brookhaven National Labs. These two organizations are amazing organizations. You really should try to make time to join us. They're both doing amazing things. Just as a quick preview, the Advanced Energy Research Technology Centers invested in a wind farm right off Long Island, the largest in the United States, perhaps the world today. And it is part of an initiative by the governor to make New York completely carbon neutral in the near future. David Manning was once Deputy Energy Minister for Alberta, has tremendous insights into that sector, as does Robert. And he's today Stakeholder Relations and Director of Public Affairs for Brookhaven. Brookhaven has a collider, an EON collider, like the one in Zurn, Switzerland. We'll hear more about that and other initiatives for Brookhaven. So I hope you can join us for that. It should be a very, very exciting event. How do you become part of Maple? As Stephen said, the best way is as an organization or a corporation. We have over 40 corporate members. The majority of benefits from being in Maple come from corporate membership. You get to bring in multiple people from your organization. You get social media support. You get to be interviewed on the internet here throughout our membership and other media tools. So it's definitely worth looking into, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about that. It also, any level of membership provides you access to the entire network, however. Montreal now, Toronto, Vancouver, New York, LA, and the Southern California cities of Orange County, Riverside, San Diego. So it's a great access point to all of that once you become a member at any level to the organization. I'm also pleased today to recognize a few new members to our organization. First, I'd like to welcome Jim Peoples, President of Challenger Motor Freight. Challenger is one of the largest truckload carriers and probably the largest cross-border carrier of freight for U.S. and Canadian companies crossing the U.S.-Canadian border with freight 500 to 700 times a day. They've been in business since '75 and are one of the quality carriers in the industry. We're proud to have them aboard. Lee Smith is owner of Reliable Logistics in Mississauga, a new member who is the owner of a company that provides small package and freight services to, from, and within the Canadian market. Again, a great asset. Lee had a prior career with Canada Post Corporation as an executive, and we're proud to have him as a member of Maple here in the New York chapter. We also learned last week that both Bob Cattell and Dave Manning have decided to join the association. And as I mentioned earlier, they bring such experience in this energy and research sector. We're thrilled to have them and look forward to everybody joining us on the 12th. And last but not least, out west, we have 4 new members. We have Lorraine Duclos, who is with Hemlock and Harding in Vancouver market. We also have Brandon Okamura to her right, who's with Oki Media in LA. Down the lower left, Pavan Dillon, Immigration Law, based out of San Francisco, and Nicole Simonian of Crowell and Mooring LLP, based in Los Angeles. So welcome to each of them for joining our association, and we look forward to working with you. Last, I'd like to say, let's do more together. We've lacked an executive cross-sector business networking organization in the region, and we now have one that's focused on the greater New York City's #1 trading partner and primary investor, Canada, at a time when we're activating the world's most significant trade agreement, the USMCA, or if you're on the other side of the border, the CUSMCA, I believe, but a great trade agreement, one that continues an already existing vibrant trade relationship. And when we need to rely on trusted supply chains and proven economic models and partners who are our neighbors, there's no time more important than now to leverage all of that. If you'd like to learn more about Maple's membership, please contact me directly at these locations. You can call me on that number or email me at john@maplecouncil.com, maplecouncil.org. I'm also on Twitter, as you can say, or you can reach out to us on our website, maplecouncil.org. You can subscribe to our newsletters to keep informed and also contact our president, Stephen Armstrong. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your time today. I want to thank Khawar Nasim again for his time and insights into the mission of the consulate here. Stephen and Robert, thank you again for creating this organization. I hope to see you all in November. Have a great week. Thank you.